let's start with the first question. Just walk us through your childhood and how it's affected your work today and your long-term plan.
Yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit about what I do?
That'd be awesome.
Okay, yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Nadya. I'm a sophomore at Harvard College, so not too far away. And I'm the founder and executive director of Period, the Menstrual Movement. And so it's an organization, we are now the largest youth-run NGO in women's health, and the fastest growing one here in the United States, which is super exciting. We're a global youth-run NGO that provides and celebrates menstrual hygiene through service, education, and policy. So we distribute period products to people who need them, and to do so we engage a global network of chapters. So since founding in December 2014, we've addressed over 210,000 periods through product distribution and registered about 170 campus chapters at universities and high schools around the US and abroad. So right now we're in about 42 states and 15 countries. Our office headquarters are in Portland, where we went to high school, and we're opening up our offices and bringing on new full-time staff for New York this June and then Boston this fall, which we're super excited about. So yeah, I run this organization. I'm super into like civic engagement for young people. I ran for office last year. I ran for city council and I lost, but we made history with student turnout. So I've been doing a lot of work traveling and speaking and trying to get young people to the polls this fall. And I'm writing a book. So I just signed with Simon & Schuster, who's a publisher based in New York, and writing a book called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement. Yeah, so I guess going into my childhood, I was born and raised in New York City before moving into Portland, Oregon. I grew up with a lot of domestic violence and abuse, but when I was growing up, I didn't really know that it was abuse because, I mean, when you grow up with it, it's like all you know, right? So to me, I think I thought it was very normal. But I grew up a few blocks away from the World Trade Center, like during and after 9/11. And so growing up, I had a very like chaotic life, right? Lifestyle, I guess, because it was one where home wasn't always so stable, but like even being at school and everything, like New York was just very, very high anxiety at that point. Like we had to be searched by bomb dogs going in and out of our apartment for years after. And the reason I say this is because I think that my childhood very much made me resilient to chaos. And when I get angry about issues, like I think when I was younger, like the only thing you could do was just breathe and say like, where do we go from here, right? Because a lot of the things growing up in that scenario when you're young is like, you don't always feel like you have power to change it. So a lot of it is just breathing and saying like, what do we do now? And I think that a lot of that is how it affects me today in being mad about what's happening in the world, or frustrated or energized by seeing now young people mobilizing and just realizing, okay, the only thing I can do is just breathe and say like, what do I have the power to change now? But I mean, another thing is, and I think why I'm such a big proponent of like women is when I was 9, my mom, we fled and we went to Portland, Oregon, because it was across the country from New York, and it was from then on like me, my 2 younger sisters, and my mom. And I think to see my mom like sacrifice and fight for us, like to live, to get through tough situations. We were like in and out of homelessness for a while, just trying to make ends meet, and seeing how my mom like continues to work her ass off just to make sure we have a roof over our heads. I think is like my appreciation for like the power of women. Yeah.
Gotcha. And can you walk us through the story of how Period became an organization and the genesis of that?
Yeah, so my passion for periods comes from a really personal place. When I was a freshman in high school, my mom ended up parting ways with her job. And within a few months, we couldn't afford to live in our home. So we actually ended up moving out and enter what I call our time of transition, which was like several months of legal homelessness, like, you know, had to mark no permanent address on school forms and like, you know, kind of couch surfing with our closest friends. And during that time, my commute to school turned from 12 minutes to over 2 hours long on public transportation. And the place where I would transition buses was in Old Town Portland, where there's like 10 shelters in a 2-block radius. And I would regularly see these homeless women to and from school, and there'd be bus delays, so sometimes I'd wait there for fucking hours. And I would just wait there, and we sort of became accidental friends, you know, like I think just talking about like complaining about the weather, the smell of weed, or commenting on like the quality of the weed, like just random things. Portland is very into that. Or like the drag queen bar down the street. Like we just sort of talked, and then like at that time, I think I just became fascinated with stories of hardship, right? I think to distract myself from what I was going through and like try to better understand like privilege and what I was going through too. So I would just be really blunt about my questions. And I remember just asking them, like, you know, how are you here? Where's your family? Have you been married? Where's your, like, I would just ask them, like, why are you here? What's your mental health? Like, what's the most challenging thing about your living situation? And I surprisingly, through that question, what's the most challenging thing about your living situation that you don't talk about, is how I kind of discovered this unaddressed natural need of menstrual health, right? And through my journal, I collected this anthology of their stories of using toilet paper, socks, brown paper, grocery bags, cardboard, cotton balls, like anything they could find out of the trash or recycling or at the local grocery store to like use for their period, right? And I would notice that when I talked to them about menstruation, like they would sort of hunch over in nervousness and like look around like if they had a bad word to say, right? And realizing like there's this stigma around menstruation that teaches people that we hide it, we feel ashamed about it, and like no one asks you about it, right? And in this time, like my family was still going through this, like still getting back on our feet. Like I think I just sort of used periods as like my obsessive thing of like how I got to forget about what my family was going through, right? It was a time when suddenly I could spend hours at night. I had PTSD from what I went through growing up, but like my PTSD came from like not being able to fall asleep. And so at night I would just be on Google looking up things about periods. And it makes me sound so weird, and I promise I'm not that weird, right? I'm not that weird. But I would just, like, I ended up with these Post-it notes of facts on my wall that just energized me, from how periods are the #1 reason why girls miss school in developing countries, because it signifies the, you know, the transition from girlhood into womanhood when society says, like, you're ready to be a wife and mother. It's also the single event that leads to girls dropping out of school, getting married early, undergoing female genital mutilation or social isolation, and then, like, even taking it to the States. Then the number was the 40. Now it's 36. 40 states in the US had a sales tax on period products because they're considered a luxury item, a non-essential good. Meanwhile, products like Rogaine and Viagra don't have that sales tax, right? So to me as a 16-year-old, like a blossoming feminist per se, I'm sitting in my room being like, are you fucking kidding me? Like old man hair growth and erections are more of a luxury or necessity than like the majority of our population feeling clean, confident, and capable 40 years of their life on a monthly basis, right? So to me, it just made sense. And I just started, you know, reaching out to nonprofits locally and nationally saying, do you give period products? Why not? And none of them did because of a lack of funds or a lack of displayed need. Because like, one, they're expensive, but two, like if organizations had them, they would only give them out if someone had the balls, or not balls, the guts to come over and say, hi, I'm menstruating and I need a tampon or a pad, right? So like, it was just a never ending cycle. So I started like literally just like, getting period products and giving them out to these homeless women I knew. I could name like these 20 women, and so I set out with a goal of just saying each week I'm going to give 20 packages, and each package is going to have everything they need for an entire menstrual cycle. And that was the idea, like 20 women a week. A few weeks after my family got our apartment back, I recruited like a friend from my school who I knew was good at Excel sheets for math class because I didn't want to deal with the finances. And so I recruited him. He didn't know what a period was when we started, so I had to explain to him at the age of 16 what a period was. And then literally like we just embarked, we went 6 hours at a Starbucks shop designing like what are we going to do, 20 packages a week. We went out the next week with 20 packages, ended up spending like 4 hours there with homeless women lining up saying, and we had to say, sorry, we ran out, we don't have any more. So that first week we went back and we redid our whole model, said indirect distribution, working with nonprofits to get out. And from there we grew exponentially. So it was 40 packages and 100 packages, and to get money I would literally do anything, not do anything, I wasn't that desperate, but like I would sit on the street, be like, and as people were passing by, be like, hi, can I talk to you? Can you give me $5? Like for period products for someone else, right? And looking back, it was a little not the smartest tactic, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Like when we started, we were looking up questions like, what is a nonprofit? What is a board of directors? What is the IRS on Google? And then I just would talk to anyone, go to like Jiffy Lube, the auto mechanic store, right? And I would speak at their staff meetings, and all the guys would put down their sandwiches slowly when I said the word period, or I'd speak at like fire insurance litigation for like random things, and get them to connect me with their moms and their daughters, and somehow kind of geared up this social media following, and then went on Eventbrite, ended up winning all the pitch competitions I could find. So I started with like $2,500 from the Hillary Clinton's Foundation, Vital Voices, and we just launched. And through social media, within 6 months, we were a national organization, and we just grew. And it's only been like it's been 3 years. And in those 3 years, we've just grown into what is now identified as like the leaders of this menstrual movement, right? So like it's just been really fun with all of our chapters. last November we hosted the world's first youth activism conference on menstruation and sold out, and had a huge conference with the congresswomen who've passed policy around this, influencers and celebrities. We had Ingrid Nilsson there, who's a big YouTuber. And in the last year, our network alone has passed about 12 pieces of legislation, from policies on campus to get period products in school restrooms. You guys should do that here if you haven't. Also, if you haven't started a chapter, you should start a chapter. But also like passing policy at the local level. So I passed policy starting here in Cambridge, and that's sort of how I got involved in local politics. And then from there, like, we've mobilized different chapters around the country to mobilize around policy. And our next big thing is repealing the sales tax in California, where they make $20 million off of taxing tampons.
Awesome.
That's my long-winded way of saying this is what period is. Yeah.
All right, super cool. And so can you walk us through, apart from period, you've also ran for city council. Can you walk us through that process? You touched a little bit on how it relates to your work with period and how you got involved. Can you walk us through the process of getting involved in that, what the campaign was like, and the aftermath as well?
So you know this a little bit more because I complained to you. The campaign was like one of the most terrifying, exhausting, but also meaningful experiences of my life thus far. I think for me, so it was really like an accident. So I came to Cambridge, and Cambridge has always meant a lot to me because growing up, in the family situation we were in, there were a lot of times where my family just had to get away or like find a safe place to go. And we would go to my godparents who lived in Cambridge like all my life. So it's always sort of had this special home to me. So when I got into Harvard, came to Harvard, would go on runs in the morning, and what sparked my interest in local politics is that I could find streets where I would feel like I was standing at the line of gentrification, right? I would stand at these intersections and look down the street and just be so angry that on one side of the street it was all the people of color and immigrants, and on the other side it was all white Harvard faculty and their kids, right? And you could see the quality of housing and the amount of people living in one area was so different just it was so blatant, right? And similar to my obsession with periods, just got really energized about it and would explore more parts of the city, look up city council meetings, go to them, and I just downloaded every publicly accessible report on income inequality, housing affordability, education equity, and ended up with an 80-page Word document about what I thought city council could be doing better. And it had statistics that energized me about how the median market price of the single family home was $1.625 million, but over 50% of public school students were at or below the 200% poverty line, right? So I was just energized, and I think I have this tendency to be so passionate about things that it sort of becomes an obsession and I can't stop thinking about it. And I started bringing it to city councilors and saying, this is what you can be doing better. And through that, it sort of became a joke with some of them I was meeting, oh, if you have so many ideas, why don't you run yourself, right? Or even residents who were if you have so many ideas, why don't you run yourself? But it wasn't a challenge, a serious, we want you to run. It was haha, very funny, why do you want to be involved, right? They were teasing me for it. And I think a lot of the reason is because even though it's such a young city and it's a college town, there had never really been, there has been, but there's never been to a point, young people saying, we deserve a seat at the table, right? And that was crazy to me because when you look at the demographic, over 25% of the demographic is under the age of 32. But yet the median age of people in council is 60 plus, right? And at the same time, over 33% of the demographic was enrolled in universities, but we've never had student or youth representation on council. So the teasing kind of got a lot, and then finally I started joking back oh yeah, I'll run and you'll endorse me, right? And then one day I just decided to file papers to run because I realized you only had to be 18 and I was 19. And to me, I was oh, I'm more than qualified. So I recruited 8 of my friends to begin with to turn down their internship opportunities and come work for my campaign full time. And ended up being about 11 of us, worked full time for my campaign the entire summer. I was traveling back and forth between there and Portland weekly. We just brought on full-time staff there. But we knocked on 20,000 plus doors. 11 of us lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. Literally couches, air mattresses, floor, chairs. We were sleeping and living off of green smoothies, quesadillas, and eggs because none of us knew how to cook. And so it was just a really fun experience. And But it was terrifying because like we launched and made a campaign video, and my goal was to literally just get the people in the city council local politics circle. But because of the power of social media, we got 33,000 views in 2 days organically, and getting messages from all over, both in support but also hating that we were running, right? Breitbart and these white supremacy groups came out and named my campaign like the start of an Asian invasion at one point, right? And so we were getting death threats regularly, and people like angry that I was a young woman of color Asian person running. And it was just something where it was exhausting because we had to go out every day knowing that we were going to get the majority of doors we would knock on would say no or slam the door in our face. I had to go out to every debate. We had like multiple debates a week by the end. Every debate and say no, that I was going to introduce myself. 26 candidates were running for 9 spots, 6 incumbents were running for re-election. Every time I introduced myself, people would laugh in the audience. And we had to go up against that, and we had to knock on doors and just know that we like believed in what we were doing. And there were times when we would just cry together. But like I think what kept us going were like the few residents who would open the door and say, finally, like someone who will listen to me and is running. Or finally a progressive candidate who's not taking special interest or development dollars, right? And I think like one of the reasons I wanted to get involved was I was so angry about how corrupt politics was. Like the fact that you could see hundreds of thousands of dollars from developers and special interest dollars going into city councilors' bank accounts, and then them not voting in favor of housing affordability, right? So to me, it was just like we were gonna run a campaign on like $9,000 against candidates who were self-funding their campaign $30,000 and upwards, or running on like $90,000. Like we were going up against a lot, and we were just saying, we're gonna do this. And we didn't win, but we made history with student and youth turnout and registering students. And so I don't regret it. My body's still recovering because like campaigning is exhausting in the way of like you never feel like you're doing enough, right? Because there's no formula on like if you do this you will win. It's like I actually struggled with feeling guilty about sleeping because like I'd fall asleep and be like everything I could be doing at this moment, like writing an email, making another phone call, making another social media post, like you never feel like you're doing enough and you always feel really inadequate. And at the same time, even people who are trying to support you can identify what's wrong with you, right? We had political consultants who would call me and say, we want you to win, so therefore change your hair, change the way you dress, change your speaking, like everything, like here's all of the things that's wrong, right? It was meaningful and on a personal level because I think it taught me 2 really big things. One, politics is more personal than political, right? When you get down to it, politics is about like those individual conversations with constituents who care deeply about potholes and parking and bike lanes, like these things that matter a lot to people. And that's what politics is about. It's about making sure that we're maximizing quality of life. Second of all, I learned to be unapologetically myself because of all these like people hating, and also realizing like and anything I did right someone could not agree with, right? So the only solution was just to be yourself. It also taught me to embrace being Asian, and I talked to you a little bit about this, but like I grew up feeling very ashamed about being Asian. I'm half Taiwanese and half Japanese, and like you know, my Taiwanese side of the family grew up in houses occupied by Japan in World War II. So like they actually didn't speak to me for a while or like speak to my mom because like I am half Japanese, right? And my Japanese grandma would make us wash our hands and say, wash the dirty Chinese off of you before you come into the house, right? So there's a lot of racism within my family. And then growing up in Portland, which is the whitest major city in the United States, you know, growing up with microaggressions and just like underhanded comments about race all the time, I think internalized in like me hating being Asian, right? Getting up early in the morning in middle school to put on heavier eye makeup, thinking it makes my eyes bigger, but really I just look like a raccoon, like, or like, you know, just wanting to like be loud and tell everyone I hated math when actually I was really good at math, or like working really hard on my driver's license because I was like, Asian women can't be bad drivers, but I'm an awful driver. And it's not because I'm Asian, I hope, but like, you know, just hating these stereotypes and like putting my all into like, how can I whitewash myself to the best of my ability? And it really wasn't until like 6 months ago where I had to like stand up and defend myself for being alive and wanting a voice and a seat at the table, and that's not because I'm Asian, right? That put me into this movement where I had to come out forward and be a voice for Asian Americans. And at the same time learning that Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority population in the United States, more than any other race, but more underrepresented than any other race in media and politics, right? And I think that's a big part of why, like, another thing that really gets me going is Asian American women are the most likely almost to be sexually assaulted, but the least likely to report, right? Because in Asian American culture, there's a lot of shame around like mental health, sexual assault, abuse, right? So like to me, there's all these things about my life that I think we're so energized around these statistics, and I think the campaign was a huge learning opportunity for me to like learn to be okay with who I am and who I want to be.
So can you walk us through the process of how you got to meet Hillary Clinton, because after the campaign, like that happened, and what that was like.
Yeah, so I'm a Teen Vogue 21 under 21 this year or last year, and as part of that opportunity, 4 of the 21 of us got to do a special photo shoot, right? And we all got this email that was like, you'll be joined by a special guest and do a big video interview with her in a photo shoot. And then a week before, I got an email in class that was like, the special guest will be Hillary Clinton. And this was while I was running too. So yeah, I flew out to New York and did a photo shoot with Teen Vogue for their one of their last print editions. And yeah, got to stand with Hillary, and then we did like an hour talk with her. And it was just, we got to ask her whatever we wanted, and it's now a video, so you can go watch the video. Yeah.
All right, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last component sort of your work over the past few years is the book. How did that come about?
Yeah.
And can you tell us what the book's about and what the plan for that is?
So my book is called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement. Really inspired by, I don't know if you guys have studied like feminist history, but like Riot Girl Manifesto and Red Stocking Manifesto, like these defining documents, like literally written documents that just sort of like defined the women's movement for decades, right? Third wave feminism, second wave feminism. So I'm sort of writing that for fourth wave feminism, saying like, this is where we're gender inclusive, we're fighting the gender binary, and we're gonna talk about basic needs and like all the work that needs to be done. And I'm writing this book. It's not done, but it's already out for pre-order, which is really stressful. And it's going out for cover reveal in the next week, and I'm not finished, but it's out, so you can order it soon. It's coming out October 16th, so I've been on book and speaking tour lately. So how it happened is the summer before, so I gave a TED Talk my senior year in high school and got approached, and people started saying like, you need to write a book about your life, because I think I pushed myself to speak very publicly about mental health and sexual assault and these things that are unfortunately very common in our world but are not talked about, right? So like, I'm very open about like, yeah, I've struggled with depression and anxiety and self-harm, like that's been a big part of my background, and unfortunately the majority of girls my age do, but it's not being solved because no one talks about it. So I think because I'm so open about it, I started being approached senior year about writing a book just by friends, and then went out and started writing a book proposal and just sent it out to agents, and ended up being brought on by a literary agency in New York to write a memoir. So I was gonna write a memoir at the age of 18. And then I changed my mind 6 months into it because I still had a relationship with my dad when I got signed. And then a few months into that, like my dad was found like guilty of child abuse, sex abuse, like verbal abuse, neglect, like all these things that, and like no contact with him, lost contact with that whole side of the family. And it was a wake up call of like, I don't even understand what's happening in my own life. Like, how am I supposed to write a book to inspire others to know what's happening in their life? And then I got dumped by my high school boyfriend and was like, the world is over. It's not over, but I think as the over dramatic high schooler, I was sort of like, I didn't feel ready to write a book. So I went to my publishers, my editors, and I was like, I'm not ready. And they were like, okay, well, you know what we need a book about the menstrual movement. Like, there's never been a book like this before, and we need a young person to write it. So I wrote this proposal, went out to publishers, and we ended up getting a huge offer from Simon & Schuster, and they started making it one of their defining books of 2018. They gave me a month and a half to write it. I am now past that deadline, but it's written. It's all written. I just like haven't gone through my edits yet. But yeah, they gave me a month and a half, which is one of their fastest turnarounds because they need to get it out before around 2018 midterm elections. So we're really on a tight deadline to like try to mobilize this movement of like young people taking action now in reproductive rights. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, so it's been really fun, but like, yeah, around like my book and my organization, and I just launched like a new TV show called Nadya Talks, where it's just an excuse for me to talk to my friends and like put it on camera. But it's been really fun. Honestly, like people think I'm so stressed out and don't sleep, but like I think my secret is like I just genuinely love and enjoy everything I do, right? So like answering emails for 8 hours a day on period is like fun for me because like I know that one email can really make a difference, right? So I think like, and you understand it too, like I think being a workaholic as a young person, like my secret is like I just love everything I do. I care deeply about it. I pick and choose my battles. I'm not a straight A student at Harvard. I never go to class unless it's mandatory and my grade depends on it. Like I really haven't gone to some of my classes since I've enrolled. Like I do what I need to do to like get by, get the grade, and like school isn't my priority, but I know it's important, right? And it's different for everyone, right? And for me, I think I've chosen what I care about and what I want to invest my time in, and I make sure that I have time to like hang out with friends friends, get lit, like be with, like, go party, and like and I'm on like the competitive hip hop team and like in a burlesque show. Like I'm very into like making sure I have time to like do fun things. Yeah.
Gotcha. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how work-life balance has evolved over the past few years, right? And how you grew to manage that?
I had to learn the whole balance thing the hard way. When I was a junior in high school, I passed out from exhaustion and went to the hospital, like literally collapsed from exhaustion, like not drinking enough water, not slept enough, and ended up going to the hospital. They did all these tests and they're like, oh, you're just tired, right? So I think that was a big wake-up call, and since then I've been very diligent of like, I put in time to shower, eat, and like hang out with friends and sleep in my Google Calendar, and like it's a thing that I need to do, and people make fun of me for it, but like that's just what I need to do because I love my work so much that if no one tells me to like shut the fuck up and go to sleep, like I will stay up working, right? And which is why I have weird sleeping habits. Like today I slept from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. right? But like that's just like you gotta do what you gotta do. But I mean it's hard. Like I think I've had a lot of like friendships and relationships end because there are moments where I sort of lose myself in my work, right? And I think I really try to make sure that I have friends and they know that I'm there for them, and if they need me, I'll drop everything and be there. But like I think that there is a point where like I'm not in part of social clubs at Harvard. I'm not partying every weekend because usually I'm on speaking tour, right? This is the first weekend that I'm going to be on campus, right? But like I think for me, like there are moments like I have to make sure to take care of myself. I'm obsessed with the gym. I go to the gym like hours every day because it's like my way to calm down. But like besides that, like I think I accept that I'm not going to be super social and I'm not going to like have a like intense like boyfriend right now because I just can't, right? But I'll have fun and like do what I need to do. Yeah.
All right, very cool. At this point, we'd like to open up questions to the audience. So, does anybody want to start?
Yeah.
And you mentioned you have a TV show. Can you explain a little more about that?
So basically, like, we're not like signed with any networks yet because we're kind of balancing offers. But we just literally launched like a few clips for fun on Facebook and YouTube. But for me, it was really like I got really into this whole like, why are there not enough Asian Americans on screen, and then like how can I get other Asian Americans, or like how can I just talk on screen? And then a friend of mine who just graduated Wellesley is now working on it full time. So we're sort of forming the idea and actually looking to bring on a team right now if you're interested. But it was really like I just hit up my friends, like some of our mutual friends, like badass like girls and women, and say like, hi, can we just hang out, and we'll talk about real stuff and like your life and why you do what you do over something funny, or like you do like, so one of my friends who's really into like big crazy makeup did my makeover for our upcoming episode. Our first episode was with one of our friends, Dolly, who's 17, lives on her own in New York, runs a huge company called Nalu Clothing that funds like uniforms for girls in school in India, and she's wearing orange every single day of the year, like all orange, right? So for our first episode, she dressed me up in orange, right? And like we haven't put it out to go viral or anything. We're just putting it out for fun, like to start testing the waters and see what's going. And we're sort of developing this idea of like just highlighting I think really badass women X voices, right? And just saying like, how can we talk about the tenets are like self-care, hustling, and breaking boundaries. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like super open. You can ask me whatever. Yeah.
Hey, so I guess like with the progression of into the mental movement.
Yeah.
Like, how did you manage to like get a full-time staff going into like NYC and all that?
Yeah. So I was volunteer for like the first 2.5 years, and then started needing to make money because I was working 6 jobs last year, which was not sustainable, just to like help my family out. So like, we started getting paid. A lot of it was fundraising. Like we just had to fundraise and say, we're onto something here, but in order to grow this organization, we need money, right? So as soon as we got the money, showed people that we could do what we do. We're one of the most publicized organizations too, so we have a lot of press, which helps. And then how we got full-time staff is like, when I came to Harvard as a freshman, one of my friends as a senior was like really into what I was doing, and then we started working together, and then we hired her out of college. So out of Harvard, she moved to Portland and relocated and working full-time there. And then suddenly it was like people from all over the country were like, we want to work, we want to get involved, like, we'll come out and work for you. And we just scrambled together to get stipends. And it was literally like, so as an organization, we promise to anyone, if you want to get involved, we'll find a way. Whether it's a chapter leader, a volunteer, or we have a summer internship program, and we've had over 150 applications this year. We're still taking some applications. But literally really, it's like, if you want to get involved and you don't know how, but you're passionate about the issue, and like, we've had people who are like, I care about STEM, and we're like, okay, we'll figure this out. And then they end up making a tampon run game for us and just code it just to break stigma, right? So like, we really are like, we'll find a way for you to get involved and like feel ownership of this movement and get involved. And I think that energy around fundraising and making sure we can support people working with us, but also as a movement, like there's always more that can be done, is how we sort of grew our staff. I think that I realized that it was a movement, like when we started getting chapters, like 7 months in, realizing like our social media was blowing up with people just saying, I can't believe I've never thought about this before. Like most of the reactions we get from people, from teens are like, I've never thought about the issue before. But when you realize it, it's like, duh, right? Because like, if you're born with the uterus, you will get your period, right? So there's like, it's a very obvious issue. I think that's when I learned it was a movement, when people wanted to get involved without me even meeting them, right? Or feeling like, let's do this together. When people started saying like in social media message, like, we got this, or I'm cheering you on, like, you got this. Like the fact that there was a we before we even said we, right? Like I think that was a big empowering thing. I think the way I define like movement and organization is I think that a movement is like a bigger thing that an organization can be a part of and help empower, but a movement is like what the organization is trying to support.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
A question and a follow-up. So
Yeah.
first, so maybe everyone in the room is clear, maybe I'm the only one that's not completely clear. I know that you said that you distribute products to women
Yes.
on a monthly basis. Can you just explain exactly what it is that your organization does, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Yes,
after
yes.
that.
So, do you know what a tampon is?
No, I
I know.
all of that.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so we put together care packages with a mixture of tampons and pads, right?
Yeah.
And that formula is developed working individually with organizations. We work with about 150 nonprofits out of our headquarter warehouses. And we have a whole operations team all run by high schoolers right now. But we have these big volunteering events, and our chapters have these events where it's like an assembly line and you put together these packages of period products, right? Then they go to warehouse or they go directly to organizations, and we stock nonprofits and shelters so they have more than enough period products, and then they give them out to homeless women that they serve, right? So it's an indirect distribution model. And that really came from like the idea of doing directly and then realizing the need was bigger. And then we mobilize chapters to do that in their local communities, right? It's sort of a spider web effect, give out to the homeless women in their area or low income or people who can't afford it. And we also distribute menstrual cups and reusable cloth pads. And so we do a lot of like sustainability work as well, because they're very bad for the environment and it's a lot of trash. And so we do a lot of that work, and then our chapters will also, we do global media campaigns, and our chapters participate in those just to start conversations about periods, right? Because the first thing we have to do when we walk in a room is just get people comfortable to say the word period, right? And like not giggle when we say the word period. When we started this organization, our name was Camions of Care, because my idea was a truck of tampons, but we couldn't say we couldn't say tampons like even 3 years ago. Like media was not ready. Like until recently, you couldn't say the word period or menstruation on TV. Like in the last decade, that's changed, right? So we had to go under Camions of Care because I typed in truck to thesaurus and got camion and put an S on it. And then we rebranded to period just to get people to say the word. So we do a lot of advocacy stuff, and we're getting ready to launch a few more photography, like photo, global media campaigns. And now we work in policy. So we work pushing for legislation from the campus, local, state, and federal level for menstrual equity.
So you said at first you were kind of just funding like, hey, give me $5 on the street to fund this. So you said that you've gotten funding. Could you just talk a little bit more about where you got your funding from and just things along those lines to obviously build to the amount of people that you're helping today? So
to start, and I think like this is a question we get a lot, because like period has actually like grown a crazy amount in the last 3 years, like more than that's been seen before. But I think that, so it started like it really was like, I would talk to anyone who would go by. There were times when I would sing on the street with my guitar for 5 hours and make $20, right? And like just trying everything. And then it was really like pitch competitions, doing social media, GoFundMe, putting our bank account on our website saying just like Venmo, like give us money. And then we slowly like grew it. And then through our partnerships, we now work with U by Kotex, Tampax, Diva Cup, Lena Cup, Lunette Cup, like all of the biggest manufacturers. And so we get a lot of free product from them. But we got our model down, so every $2 that comes into our organization, we address another period, right? So I think people were mobilized of like just giving what they had, like $2, what none the period. Then we now work in fashion too, so we actually have a number of lines and hats out that say like, go with the flow, don't cramp my style. Or we just launched a line of shirts that says, anything you can do, I can do bleeding. And so we just launched like interesting ways of bringing in revenue, right? Like how can you mobilize people and also make money from it, put it back into the organization. Applying, I was so obsessed about it. I would apply to grants one a night. Like I'd apply to awards and grants that got money every single night. I would sit down for 2 hours and say, gonna crank this out, gonna go for it. And they'd be like $500, $1,000. And then it was like 5,000, 10,000. And we still 5,000, 10,000. We just hired a development director to bring in the $100,000, $200,000 grants, right? But for a while it was just like, let's just bring in whatever we can, have an event where we ask for money. And I think a lot of it is like every time I did a speaking event with like a big conference, like our bank account would grow, right? So I think just really bringing people in sort of on this movement, like people are in it for like why they care about it, yeah. But I mean,
there wasn't any like specifically big companies that you went after, that you went for kind of like the big check, almost fundraising.
No.
I think it was more just.
So we're grassroots. Like we
Right.
have a lot of our money comes from like $5, $10 donations from a lot of people, right? So it's like a very grassroots movement. But we are now at a stage where we're going after big companies, right? So through the Teen Vogue, I got $25,000 from Tom's Shoes, and so we're working with them actually on a few upcoming we're doing a multi-day conference for Period now in the fall in LA. But now we're going after big money. So I fly out to the West Coast actually like once or twice a week for day trips to go pitch to new companies or pitch to big, like we're bringing the pharmaceutical industry in. And, we are working with like Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark, like these big corporations to bring in funds to support what we do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is more about the stock or pitch competitions.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, since you have to pitch to a lot of different companies, and since you started off really small, what was the rate of success that you generally were able to generate?
At the beginning, I won all of them because like when I started, even now you look up period organizations and there's quite a few of them. But when we started, we were like one of the first ones. And I think because the mission is so easy to catch on to, right? Like you can't hear about this and be like, I don't support you, because if you say that, you're saying you don't support gender equality, right? And so growing up in Portland, where like it's a liberal bubble, if I went in and I said, if all of you guys don't vote for me, like you are not a proponent of gender equality, and people would be like, okay, But I would also say like, check your privilege. Like if you've never worried about getting a period product, you're privileged, right? And like I would tell people, like I think we just got our pitch down to a way where people would feel guilty if they didn't vote for us, or feel like they weren't part of something bigger that they needed to be, right? And so at the beginning it was a lot of that. I mean, recently I haven't done a lot of pitch competitions because we don't qualify because we're too big now. But I think a lot of it, and we have a few big ones coming up. But like I think now, when like we've been rejected from a lot of grants. And the reason we're rejected from a lot of grants is because I'm a student working full time. We're run by students. Most of us are students. And a lot of grants, like that's a no. Like they are only gonna give you big money if you have a full-time team devoted only to this, right? So I think in a lot of places, like when we are rejected, and we're rejected a lot, like we've been rejected maybe from 80% of the grants that we've applied to, right? So we apply to a lot. But I think a lot of it is like people are like, it's new for a bunch of teens to run something. Yeah.
So I followed you on Instagram. I saw in your description you're the co-founder of Next Fellows.
Yes.
So what is the story behind that?
So Next Fellows is my other nonprofit. I run a nonprofit called nextfellows.org. I started it on the night of the presidential election. So it actually started because I started posting on social media the night of the election. I was so angry I could not sleep. I just started messaging people like, send me your election reaction series. And I just hashtag election reaction. And we ended up getting like 400 stories from students all around the country in 2 days. And I just posted them on Huffington Post because I had publication access. I later got in trouble for it, but I just started putting them on Huffington Post. And just like the energy around people. And I just keep seeing this message from young people around the country saying, I'm so angry, I'm so upset, or like, I'm really happy that Trump won, but I don't know what to do now, right? And there's still this like young people like, I'm energized, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. So we ended up creating this organization, me and a good friend of mine. And we now peer mentor young students who come to us and they say, I'm super passionate about this one issue and I want to do something like this, but I don't know where to go, right? I don't know what my first step is. Like, I don't know how to start, where to get funding, how to get press, how to build a team. So what we do is we have a team of really great peer mentors, and then we have a bunch of resources from funding to press to, just wanting to share your story. And so we take applications from young high schoolers and college students and even post-grads too, who say, I'm passionate about this, I don't know what to do, but I'm ready to do it. And then we do like weekly peer mentorships with them to bring their idea to life, right? So we have a bunch of Next Fellows around. So I mentor two people, one who just graduated from University of Washington, who's doing some work around Parkinson's and advocacy around Parkinson's, because she cares about that because her father passed away from it. And then I'm doing work with another student in Massachusetts who cares a lot about mental health in schools. Yeah. Yeah.
How is because obviously for males, we don't understand it in a first-hand basis. How has the overall tone been in responses to their
Yeah. So my co-founder is a guy, right? And actually the majority of our team used to be guys too. Our warehouses we're often managed by guys, right? So we've actually had no trouble getting men involved. We say the men in administration, that's what they are. But I think for us, the way we've always brought men in is saying it unfortunately is a privilege that you have never thought about this before, right? If you don't get your period and our society doesn't talk openly about it, you can go your whole life and never have to think about it, not even know what it is, not know what the product is. And I think that we really demand that we need both men and women and everything in between in this conversation, because when we talk about making systemic change and changing society, 50% of our population is still men, less than 50%, but a big chunk of our population is still men. But 80% of people in Congress in the US are men, right? If 80% of these people are afraid to talk about periods, won't acknowledge it as a natural need, it will continue to go unaddressed, right? So saying we demand that men are in this conversation. And if you as men believe in gender equality and believe in equal access to education and employment, and we can name statistics about how periods are the number one reason why girls miss school in developing countries, and period-related pain is the number one reason why girls miss school in the US, right? To name these things and then for you to say I'm not comfortable talking about it or not comfortable changing society, that's a you problem that you really need to work on, right? But I think that's where we sort of gotten in. And I think when you see, it's really amazing to see when guys come into our organization, a lot of guys came into the organization because one of our team members got into a fight with them. One of the girls got into a fight because the guy made some offhand comment oh, I don't care about this. And then our girls yelled at them, and then they came involved because they were so convinced. That's a lot of the stories of the men involved. But I think it's amazing to see they come in and even in our first few meetings, they won't say the word period, right? They'll say I'm so happy to be part of this organization, or this time of the month is so important to address. And we just push them to say, we will stop conversation and say, I'm sorry, what? A period, right? A period. We're talking, say what it's called. And then you see they become our strongest pitch people. Because I think what's amazing about seeing men, and also our biggest donors are men. But what you see is I think for women to get up and become a period warrior, as we call it, they have to personally acknowledge that they menstruate and that they are proud of their period, which is hard to do, right? For you to stand up and say, I'm on my period and it's okay, that's a nerve-wracking thing to do. Men don't have to do that. Men can say, I don't get my period, but I believe it should be addressed. So it's kind of another thing, you're advocating for another, so you don't have to come through your personal journey of it, right? So I actually think that men become quicker fearless not better fearless advocates, but quicker fearless advocates, because to them they're talking about something that they don't themselves have to acknowledge, right? For women, for us to demand that you get up, people are going to say, I don't care about periods, and you have to realize that they're talking about they don't care about your period, right?
So you throw them on their heels, that's a big tactic.
Yeah. Well, not throwing them on the heels, but I think a big tactic is saying why, asking why do you think you've never thought about this, right? Why do you think you're so uncomfortable? Or why are you blushing so much, right? Or do you realize your mom got your period and that's why you exist, right? I think saying things, asking questions there's a reason this might make you feel uncomfortable, and that's a problem. And you being uncomfortable and everyone other man being uncomfortable about this issue is causing these inequalities, right? And there are people we run into who say, at the end of the day, they say, I just really can't get on board with this because I think hunger is a bigger issue, right? Or I think climate change is a bigger issue. Or I don't think men and women are equal. We get a lot of that too, right? But I think when you hear that, there are times when we're okay, we're at a dead end, I give up. But I mean, we learn to I think, and why I'm so passionate about this, I think this is one of the most intersectional issues there is, right? When you talk about climate change, the average menstruator uses 17,000 products in their life. Each disposable product takes 5 to 8 centuries to decompose. So you can relate it to that, right? If you talk about hunger, it's okay, hunger exists because of poverty. And in order to get single moms who make up the fastest growing part of the population in poverty, it means making sure they're confident and capable to be in school or be at a job 100% of the time, right? So I think there's ways we can relate it to so many different issues that makes people really, really excited about what we're doing. Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. So my question is more about the international outreach.
Yeah.
So for me, since I lived for the past 5 years in India, I wondered because there seem to be a lot of NGOs focusing on women's products, and I wonder if it's easier sometimes to have that international outreach versus in the United States, which is actually much more conservative than actually a lot of third world countries.
It's interesting because like in India and the UK, activism around menstruation is so much more advanced. But the issue is still very much there, right? In India, 70% of reproductive diseases are caused by poor menstrual hygiene, going from anywhere from infections to maternal mortality, right? So the issue is bigger. At the same time, like the need is bigger, right? And on a cultural level, the reason I think activism is so strong in India is because there are cultural practices like social isolation, right? Where like girls are locked away when they're on their period, right? Or not allowed to see light, or allowed to see people, or allowed to touch men or touch food or walk into a kitchen, right? So there's the culture around there is a lot more intense, which is why I think the activism has to be more intense, right? Because the issue is broader. So in that way, like my answer to your question is like, in some countries, it's easier to go into the activist community and talk, but it's harder to actually change things at a large scale, right? And also, we have to acknowledge that culture is different. We cannot go into India and say, what you're doing is wrong, right? Even if we think it's wrong, it's culture and it's embedded in like from the beginning of culture, right? Or in Nepal, where multiple girls have died because girls are put away in cow sheds, like in the middle of like cold when they're on their period because they're considered like contaminated. Girls are considered contaminated. We think that's wrong. The practice is illegal, but we cannot go in and say this is fucked up, right? Because it's part of culture and it's not actually put forward by men. It's enforced by women. It's all these practices are enforced by women because they say like women are sacred, and sometimes it's a positive thing. Women are sacred, so they need time to clean their bodies, right? So it's hard to work internationally because you have to understand that the way the U.S. thinks can be very patronizing if you go in and say this is all screwed up, right? So we have to be very careful about it, and so we have to work with a lot of communities on the ground, which is why we love working with chapters. And culture is really different even around products. Like we can't distribute tampons or menstrual cups in Latin America a lot of the times because putting anything inside is considered losing your virginity, right? So I think in that way, there's a lot of things we have to be careful about. And something I really want to do this summer is travel internationally. So I'm trying to recruit teams. If you guys, seriously, DM me, slide into my DMs on Instagram. I will respond. I love stalking people on Instagram, and I love working with new people. So reach out to me, I will respond. But I want to put together a team. My dream right now is put together a team, get a video crew, and travel around the world and collect stories of what is it like to have your period around the world, and how can we change it? Yeah. Are we time? Let's check. We're 7:25.
Oh, perfect. Okay. One more question.
One more question?
Yeah. And actually, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in with. So, what on a broader level, what excites you about the future and what scares you, both for you personally and us at large?
What scares me about the future is that hate and inequality is sort of becoming acceptable to support, right? I think with what you see in the rhetoric in the Trump administration, but also in the rhetoric just around how that's mobilized a lot of white supremacist groups or just opponents of that, the fact that it's now almost acceptable, or it's not, I don't think it's acceptable, but it's sort of becoming more acknowledged and okay that hate is okay and spewing hate is okay, and I think that really scares me. I think what I'm really hopeful though is I think that people are starting to realize how powerful young people are, and older generations are needing, now businesses, we were just talking about this in the car, Gen Z consulting is so profitable right now because old people need to understand young people, right? We're the biggest generation in history. We are, we spend the most money, but also, we are fastest to mobilize. The reason it's so easy to get a job in PR and social media is because companies and businesses need social media to do things, and we grew up with it. It's second nature to us, right? So, I think what I'm so excited about is young people can do shit, right? And the reason I think young people need to do shit is when you think about politics and social change, they're really just games of who has the better idea to better the future, right? Republicans and Democrats are who has the better idea to make it better in 3 years or 50 years, right? Who better to have a part in that conversation than the future leaders and the future generation of our world, right? That's crazy to me that they're defining future for us. So I think that's what makes me most hopeful. It's this youth energy and how we can do it. And it makes me mad when young people say what I do, my vote doesn't make a difference, right? Because even a post on social media can really make a difference.
All right, perfect. And I think we have time for one last question.
Yeah.
How do you like combat like the imposter syndrome or like self-doubt? Like I know that you're like this major like go-getter, like you sound so confident obviously, but I'm not sure if it's always been that way or like how you kind of like rose up in the ranks to like get to where you are today.
So I'm definitely more confident now, but I'm like super insecure still. Like even about like body, like I have like, cause I was a ballet dancer for a while, and then I played boys varsity baseball for 2 years in high school because they want to start a softball team, so I joined the baseball team. But like I think because of like being in sports and dance, like I've always struggled with body, so that's like the first part of my insecurity, and I think I've always struggled with that. But in terms of imposter syndrome, in terms of my ability and if I'm actually making a difference, like that's something I struggle with like every day, every moment of the day. Like I think it's always in the back of my mind. And like even going to sleep, like I go to sleep every day feeling like there's so much more that I could have done better, or like that I could be doing more, right? And I think that's sort of like, I hate to say it, but like it does fuel my energy because it makes me work really hard, because I feel like I'm still struggling with like trying to lose the feeling of like trying to prove myself, right? In high school, I struggled with continuing to find myself in relationships where I was like beat up, sexually assaulted, like accepting that my self-worth came from my body, or like I struggle with self-harm and suicide stuff because I like really struggled with like what is my worth, or like what is my potential. And I think like that mental health stuff never really goes away, right? And I think the way it comes into my life is like, even when I win awards and I get like a big spread in Oprah magazine or Teen Vogue, or like something really big happens, or get to meet Hillary Clinton, like it doesn't feel like a big deal to me, because at the end of the day I'm like, I did my job, or like what's next, or like like maybe they think I'm cool, but like I think I still struggle with like, but am I actually making a difference? Like, is all this superficial press, like, is it actually making a difference, or am I just sort of like making a lot of noise, right? And I think that the way I try to reconcile with my imposter syndrome is to like talk to other young women and other young men, or like, and everyone in between too. But like I think you realize that everyone struggles with imposter syndrome, right? Everyone has those moments, and no one admits it because it makes you feel weak, right? And makes you feel vulnerable. But I think it's really important to have those discussions of like, why am I feeling sad, or like why am I feeling like I'm not enough, right? And like also making sure that you tell yourself that you're enough, right? Like I have cheesy ass post-it notes around my bed that say "you are enough" that my sisters wrote, or like I remind myself like in times like when I'm with my friends that like maybe all I need is my friends and I'm gonna be fine, or like I need my family and I'm lucky, right? And I think what keeps me going is like hearing the stories of the homeless women we work with when like they're really just struggling to get food on the table, or get food in general, and like to remind myself that like I'm so lucky to be able to have this, and to be able to have a voice, and to have a platform. And I think that really helps with reconciling imposter syndrome. Yeah.
All right, round of applause.
Thank you.